panel discussion that explores situations of personal dilemmas at a young age and how the actions taken inspire protagonists as well as readers. The session is called Everyday Courage. The panelists for the session are Janaki Sabesh, Dhwani Sabesh, and the moderator is Sunaina Coelho. Sorry, Sunaina, you're here, right? And the session is moderated by Vinitha. Janaki Sabesh writes, performs, and lives through stories. Her distinctive and authentic style of blending narration, music, and movement is loved by children, youngsters, fellow storytellers, corporate professionals, teachers, and everyone alike. Janaki has authored the Jungle Storytelling Festival 2018, a picture book for children published by Tulika Books, and co-authored Pati's Rasam 2021, published by Karadi Tales. Wearing a variety of hats and totally in love with it, of an accomplished actor, voiceover and theatre artist, experienced marketer, facilitator, and the chief fun officer at her own storytelling initiative, Golpo Tales, she also brings people together through intimate storytelling experiences around food, music, and nostalgia. Janaki finds complete joy in transforming mindsets through storytelling. Dhwani Sabesh is a cloud kitchen brand creator for a leading food delivery platform in India. A young India fellow from Ashoka University, she also studied media and culture at SOAS, University of London. In 2021, she turned children's author with Pati's Rasam, co-authored with Janaki Sabesh, published by Karadi Tales. She grew up watching her grandmother cook and is passionate about her cooking and all things food. She documents her culinary experiments on Instagram from time to time. Acha, good stuff. I'm going to take a look at it. On her handle, Dhwani Sabesh. Sunaina Coelho is an animator and illustrator based in Bangalore. She designs visuals and animation for clients ranging from publishing houses, toy companies, and television channels to app developers. Sunaina grew up in New Delhi and graduated from the National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad. She started working in Mumbai and now lives in Bangalore with her husband Fahad, also a designer, and their son Orhan. In her free time, she enjoys gardening, consuming novel food, books and films, and being outdoors, near the sea or in the mountains. Our moderator for this session is Vinitha. Vinitha is an award-winning author whose recent career history has largely been about introducing and managing transformative change in the space of education and literature. She has written over 24 books, fiction, non-fiction, picture books for children, and her stories are part of CBSE and ICSE curriculum. Her book, Ammu and the Sparrows, won the Neve Literature Award 2021 and made it to the Parag Honor List and is being used by therapists in narrative healing. In 2019, her book, Sarah Learns to Fly, won Best Children's Book of the Year award by FICCI. She's currently collaborating with women artists for an international project and is now in the midst of writing a food memoir. Thank you so much, panelists and moderator. Please welcome them once again.
Thank you so much, Kapil, for doing what you do with so much of energy and through the day. I don't know where you get this energy from. Hi, Janaki. Hi, Dhwani. Hi, Sunaina, who I'm meeting for the first time. And I've been looking for all from since yesterday. Okay, so I'm going to just generally chat because we're all like sort of friends and we've been there together. And we're all doing similar kind of work in the space. And because we are in India and because stories have been a part of our tradition since forever, and even before oral storytelling, we've been drawing stories, right? And in context of that, and I'm thinking that I want to just place the conversation because I want to say that we have on the one hand this, and today when I do sessions with children, I always talk that a story is not a story unless you have a story arc. We talk of, you have to have a conflict, otherwise the story is not a story. So I want to put that also, I want to park that also aside. And we just had a wonderful session just before this on voices that are little heard. And today it's, I think this conversation is so important because it's about everyday courage. And the fact that in this story arc business, sometimes everyday stories don't, I mean, even forget storytelling, even in our daily lives, there are stories happening, unfolding every day. And sometimes we don't pay attention to that right in front of our eyes. And therefore, when these stories get told and get celebrated, it's such an amazing thing. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to have a question and I'm going to ask one specific person in the panel. And then I also want the others also to answer that, right? So the first question is to you, Janaki. And I want to know, what does a story mean to you? I want to know, what do we want to say when we tell a story? And I'm asking this to you specifically because I know that you have been part of storytelling in so many formats. You've been an actress, so you're in the story. You've been in theater, you've been in advertising, and in every format you've been there in a different mode. And now you've been telling stories, and now you're writing stories. And so you've been in that arc of a story, in a different kind of arc. What does story mean to you? And what kind of stories are we telling now?
Thank you, Vinitha. And thank you for doing what you're doing. And of course, for Sarah and Ammu. I think for me, story means connection. Whether it is on screen, whether I'm able to connect with the Aam Janta, with a character that I'm portraying. I might be very different from her, but I still am the medium through which her story gets to be known, gets to be absorbed, gets to be, spoken about. And in theatre, where I get instant gratification. Of course, I'm not even getting into storytelling because that's completely different.
Right.
And it is all about something that you said about being in the story. For me, story means that whatever I am visualizing as I'm narrating, as I'm performing in the story, my audience, whoever it is, whether it's a 3-year-old child or a 30-year-old adult or a 80-year-old senior citizen, is able to visualize it.
Right.
It will not be the same. It will not be the same. But the fact that I am seeing the story in front of my eyes means I'm living the story.
Absolutely.
And for me, being authentic on stage matters. So the moment I'm authentic, the moment I share the story, whether I make a fool of myself because it's part of the story, the person who's listening, already has a visual imagery because he's absorbed into
so
the
it's
story.
multiple journeying through one story, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now when I'm writing and especially co-authoring with Dhwani, I'm able to understand perspectives.
Right.
Because I see the story in a particular way, especially in context of Pati's Rasam.
Right.
And Dhwani saw it in a completely different way.
Right.
So that itself came to, it was such a big revealing moment for me that, yes, stories within the same family, within the same household, within the same story,
Yes.
has two very, very distinct perspectives. Okay. So I think that is what story means to me.
Means to you. Dhwani, what about you?
For me, I think it's about the ability to connect dots.
Right.
Because I think these dots exist and each one of us can connect them differently and reveal a different picture.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that's what I'd say.
I was having a conversation with someone today about just this, about the dots. And sometimes we want the connection to be drawn for us. And that's not what storytelling is about, actually. It's about you finding that connection. And there are so many ways to find that pattern and that connection. And every pattern is different. Yeah, wonderful. What about you, Sunaina?
So I think especially in the context of Ikru's first day at school, there aren't any words in the book. It's completely
It's a
pictures.
wordless book, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it offers a lot of scope for interpretation.
Right. So
like,
when you're putting a story together,
Yeah.
what do you want to say then?
I think a lot of things. So depending on this, as soon as you take any subject, uh, and of course I feel like it has to have some personal relevance.
Of course.
It has to have some trigger for you. And for this book, it definitely did, because at that point, my child was about to have his first day at school. So I thought it was a perfect time it was a perfect opportunity to observe what would happen. And not just observe him, but just really get to observe a lot of kids and their reactions. So different reactions to one situation.
Right.
Yeah, so that's really what happened.
Okay.
And how the book came about.
We often take up subjects that are like two ends of the spectrum of storytelling, right? You talk of either victories, or you're talking about how you successfully overcome challenges. The ordinariness, and we just talked about the ordinariness of everyday living, that is so filled with so many proverbial mountains. And when you just said the first day of school, I want to tell you that the first day of school nightmare, which is the anxiety of a parent, is being talked about, and it's turned many people into creators actually. Yes, it has. So one of the books I done way earlier was about a guy called Gijubai Badeka, who was a lawyer who turned a teacher because he thought of his son going to school, and he thought, oh my God, what a nightmare it's going to be. I don't want my son to. So anyway, that's not the point. The point is that when I opened your book, Sunaina, I was so moved by the sensoriality. I mean, both the books are so sensorial, actually, very, very sensorial. But you've captured it so amazingly, through just visuals. And I feel that why would you pick up this subject? How did you get the subject to be convincing enough to do that everyday first day of a child, and to find the nuances of those peaks and those valleys that happen in just 4 hours or 2 hours of the first day of school?
So like I said, I was just very lucky to have that situation right in front of me. So it's almost like cheating, because I got to be there. And so the thing is that in this book, the mum drops off Ikru and leaves, but that didn't actually happen because I was there.
That means you really cheated.
Yes, I really did. So I was allowed to be outside in the yard, which is where the whole story begins. So I was allowed to actually just be there the whole day, I think for the first day, or maybe the whole, for a few days. So I got to see a lot of things, and there was, so I did actually have to write down notes of this book. So there were lots of notes I put in, and then I had to choose, of course, what to actually show.
But how could you convince somebody? I mean, this is every day, everything. To convince a publisher to do a book on this must have been something.
No, that really was not something I had to do. I've worked with them before, so I think, it worked out.
Okay, all right. All right.
Yeah.
Dhwani, does anybody else want to jump into this question about the ordinariness of lives and storytelling? Would you want to add something to it, Janaki or Dhwani?
I think every day is ordinary and
Extraordinary.
Extraordinary. I think in the morning, right, Nandita Basu spoke about, while we are speaking, this is a story. It's happening, and we can choose to make it a boring conversation or something that, it lies in our hands, right? It lies in the way we look at it. So I think every day has a story, and it is your choice whether you want to take that and convert it into a book, which I'm sure you can't. I mean, Shobha is smiling. Don't come to me with some 365 manuscripts. But I think every day there are many moments in our life in a day that are very, very book worthy.
Right.
But to be able to tell it in a form, that is a huge task.
And that resonates with globally resonates with everyone, right?
No, I'm just going to add to one thing she said. I think there are multiple moments in our day that are worthy of being retold.
Yeah.
But how many of them should be retold enough number of times to become a book is questionable.
Is the question. Yeah, that's interesting, correct. Yeah.
And also, I think when you make that decision to make a book out of a certain experience, I mean, you have to go through with it. So there's a lot of work and sweat that goes into that. So you better be willing to put your money where your mouth is, kind of thing. Yeah. So there's a lot of work which finally goes into it. So that's why we probably don't do that, make books out of all our experiences.
My next question is to Dhwani, and I mean, I think food is such a powerful subject because it means so many different things. The fact that food is vulnerability, for sure. I know that the reason why kings had food tasters was because you could poison food and you could kill them. Because when you offer food, you offer so many things, right? Food and memory are certainly connected. And a whiff of a single fragrance, even while you're passing through, can open a whole vault of memories, right? So I want to park the question I'm asking you in context to this, especially since the protagonist of your book is a granddaughter who stands right there between the past, her grandmother, and the future, which is herself, with her mother right there, right? So it's and as I'm saying this, I'm getting goosebumps because it's so many things that you have done through one story, and like Sunaina's book, this is also a very sensorial book because there's one image of her taking her grandmother's sari, and I know that one of the most tough parts when someone passes away is to go back to that home because the home is still fragrant with them, So you use food and you use the touch of a sari, so many things over there. I want to ask you in context to the mother, grandmother, and approaching memory, what was the journey you took while you did that book? And the ordinariness of a rasam, which is so integral in South Indian food.
So, confession to all of you who may or may not know, a lot of Malli's experiences are based off of me.
Yes.
And Amma is my mother, and Pati is my Pati, her mother. And rasam was an ordinary thing that my Pati would make for me all the time. I was the obnoxious kid who would decide whether I would go home or to Pati's house after school based on the menu. And I would do this standing in the middle of the road because we lived across each other, where I would scream and say, "What is the menu?" And Pati's house always won. There's no doubt about that. And I realized, and I actually realized this only recently when we were working on the book, that once my Pati passed, I actually stopped liking rasam. There used to be a time where I wanted rasam once a week. Now I'm okay with having it maybe once a month, once in 2 months. Like the frequency reduced, and I didn't have that same kind of love for rasam, which is something I realized only when working on this book. And actually, the character of Amma, I think, would be based both on my mother as well as her sister, my Chitti, right, who's actually the one who, inherited more of Pati's cooking. Sorry, mom. That didn't come out right, but she's the one who kind of kept Pati's recipes alive, and she had all these recipes in a book. Right. So when we were writing this, we were trying to figure out, and Shobha Aunty knows this, because there were so many versions of how the story should, of the story arc. There have been right, versions with 21 characters. There have been versions with 1,500 words for a 300-word picture book. There have been versions where Malli is suddenly 27. So we actually really struggled. And I think that's when it really helped for us to have an outsider's perspective, which was Shobha Aunty, because every draft we went back, she would ask us the questions that at some point we couldn't see because we were too close to it. So right, I think the journey has been cathartic. I think that we knew, I think, even before we started writing the book, that this telling the story was going to be cathartic. But more importantly, I think we understood uh, just how much you need to say, and more importantly, how much you need to learn not to say.
Not to say, exactly.
And I think, and that was also a bit of an exercise for the two of us, even in our coming to terms with the story ourselves, I think,
Right.
if that makes sense.
And visually, Pallavi Jain's work was also so powerful, right?
There she
Because-
is.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah,
Because
Pallavi just
there's-
brought it to life.
There are some pages where just the picture is there and you just feel so moved by just that visual, right? There's no need for words over there. Yeah, completely. So why food, and why did you all choose food to convey navigation of grief?
Food, because it just came naturally. When she got the idea of the story, because of so much, I mean, because of our lived experience, the idea also came very naturally to us. And I consider myself a bit of an accidental author, because she just called me, and I remember she was on this rickety bus ride from Kohima. And she calls me, and there was like patchy network, and she's like, I got this idea and I had to tell you right now. So I said, I don't know what you're doing, who will publish it, if anybody will publish it, but I'm writing this.
Right.
And I think it was more for me that I wrote it. And that's also how I operate as a person. Food, like you said, like food is everything for me. There are two very important people from my life here who will agree. So I mean, every memory, it's like, oh, when I went there, I had this, and then I'm trying to recreate that taste. So, yeah.
But food is such a connector.
Massive,
You know,
massive.
It is.
Yeah.
And we, all of us, sometimes have inexplicable things we like and dislike only because of memories attached to that food. Yeah, so it's an interesting vehicle to convey so many things. Janaki, what about you? What would you have to add in this role that you played in collaborating?
So I still remember that conversation I had with Shobha saying, I have this idea. We meet for chai occasionally. And she said, write it. I said, Shobha, it's nothing. It's just an idea. Write it. No, Shobha. She said, write it. And she could see something very moving, and it connected. So right from that to understanding where the story, like she said, 1,500 words. And,
Right.
you know, my brevity was never there in our lives. It was constantly, because, you know, as a storyteller, you in 15 minutes, there's so much that you say. And then when you say that, no, it's a picture book.
Right.
And that's when you realize that beautiful collaboration between picture and text. I've learned that from workshops that Shobha has done. And thank you for that. Because I would have never, it's for me like every single thing should be said or, you know, drawn, or no, it's not that. So I met so many parents, children, teachers today who said that we stay with this one image forever.
Right.
That is, you can spend hours together just looking at Malli, saying that this is not my party's rasam.
Right.
I don't even have to taste it.
Right.
Now that word, that phrase is very, very powerful, but the picture is equally powerful too.
Yeah.
So where does one get the balance? I mean, that's where an illustrator, storyboard by Jayanti, illustration by Pallavi Jain, and of course the Sutradhar, the person who said, no, you will write only this much, Shobha. It's a teamwork. It's a teamwork, because the story is there, but what if it didn't come out this way? We won't be sitting here, you know. So she has the final with her experience, but we were very clear from the very beginning. See, Kapil is a storyteller. He'll, I think, resonate with this. When I started my storytelling journey, I was very scared, skeptical of using the word death, grief, loss, because I didn't know how parents would react. Forget the children. And how do I say? So we'll say, she's gone to another place. You know, she's gone to the stars,
Right.
and all that. But COVID taught us that children are not spared.
Right.
They saw something happening. I think that was something which triggered both of us, saying that, and because this was almost like a lockdown project. We were both together, thankfully. And we said, why are we shying away? Today there was an interesting perspective by a parent who said, this child doesn't understand, her child doesn't understand grief, death, So he thinks that she is in a frame. It's a beautiful picture. I mean, for all those who haven't read it, please go. It's still, Sante is still on. Get your copy. Party's photo is there in a frame and there is mala, but for him the mala is of no significance. So he said, "Arey dadi ka main kya loon? Acha main chashma leta hu." Dadi is still there. But for him, it's framed. So see, each person is taking, but we need to talk about grief. I think that is why this everyday
I think
courage.
they don't understand grief.
Or we are not able to put it.
They're not able to process it enough to put into words that we understand. Maybe that is what
I think as adults also we're quite terrible
Yes,
in having difficult
absolutely,
conversations,
absolutely.
especially grief. And I think there was so much collective grief during COVID, right? That we just didn't know what to do, because suddenly people are reduced to numbers. Like it was a thing that my grandmother used to do, my other grandmother who lives with us. The thing that she would do every morning is look up COVID stats. And she
Yes.
was the only one who could see it for people.
Right.
She would say so many people. I would just read a number. And you need those things to happen. So when we don't have the right vocabulary to talk about grief, how are the kids going to take it? Because they take it from us. So if this, one of the things that I think it's an unintended, but I'm really glad it's a consequence of this book, is if we're able to start having if we're able to take the
Absolutely.
courage to start having more difficult conversations
Conversations.
about things that even we struggle to talk about, because their perspective is really fresh and it
It
might
is
teach us a
easier
thing
for
or two.
children to talk through a story about things that are difficult for them, and that is why books are like really like therapy, narrative therapy. You know, yeah, that's great. You know, I've always been on the side where I don't believe in using visuals with children. So whenever I have a session, they'll say, "Do you need to have a, a screen or?" And I never do that because I feel images constrict the imagination of a child. And every time I see books like this, I always think that I'm mistaken about it, because it really lets you explore things in. It gives you a starting point to explore, you know. So I want to say that I take back how I feel about, visuals being more important. And I always been in a school of thought where I felt, let's keep the visuals away, let the child imagine, because imagination is way bigger. But sometimes you just need those visuals. And I want to talk about, Sunaina, about the wordlessness of your book, okay? And the wordlessness of a lot of dilemmas that children go through, and they don't have words for it. I think childhood basically is about a lot of powerlessness. Going to school is non-negotiable. It's like literally going for wearing a particular dress for an occasion is non-negotiable. So, and those are like some of the things that we can talk about on an everyday basis. I think every minute of the child is basically about powerlessness, and how limited agency a child has in their childhood. What do images do that words may not be able to do is one question. And I would ask both you, Janaki and Dhwani, are picture books as a genre able to do what words may not be able to do, to convey? But Sunaina, first you go, because you've done a wordless book.
Images actually, because they offer a wider interpretation, can be very useful, because so it tells you something, but without telling you, exactly. It's sort of like a frame on which you can build using, or you can paint using the materials which you have at hand within you. So it can work well as a kind of a frame and a starting point for you to begin understanding something. And I think with a child, on one hand, there is powerlessness, but there's actually so much freedom also, at least from the point of view as an adult, when you end up tying yourself up, constraining yourself.
Yes.
So when you look at a kid, you realize they don't have those boundaries. So it's such a strange situation, because physically, yes, they have boundaries, but mentally they're so much more free. And the points which you were talking about emotion, about grief, and about difficult subjects. And we feel like, oh yeah, kids can't deal with it. But the thing is, it's actually us. We can't deal with it too well, and we just sort of, it's easy to kind of say, oh yeah, it's not us, it's the kids. But I don't think it's true. I think it's us. We find it hard, and we find it hard to, so like, especially like, from the time your child is small, like a simple thing like learning how to walk, watching them, crawl and sort of not even know how to put the first hand forward and hitting their face. They actually go through that, and watching it is so painful as an adult.
Not for the child, probably. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, probably not for the child, but as an adult, it's so painful watching it.
Right.
So, yeah, so I think.
So do you feel images are more powerful than words? Would you say that? Would you want to commit to that?
I could say that because I find it easier to draw than write. So yeah, I would say that for that reason. But not always true, because it depends. Sometimes words can offer a lot more direction and be a lot more precise.
Yeah.
You know. So, and also, I mean, as adults, we usually don't, in fact, look at picture books. We just read books because sometimes we just take refuge in that direction which someone else is offering, I guess. Yeah.
No, I think now we're going to be, as a generation, we're going to be looking at visuals and multiple literacies while we look at anything as it is. We're going to be wanting to read and listen and also see all together. And that's how we're consuming anyway, everything,
Yeah.
Instagrammers that we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting how, there are things in the visuals that you've done where there is, he's dragging his mother because he's excited to go to school. And the next minute, the bewilderment in the face because a stranger, complete stranger, the teacher takes him inside. Those things, sometimes you need so much more words to say. And you've done it in 2 images. And I think that was amazing. Janaki, because we are people of words, what do you think?
So, in the book, there is this beautiful picture almost in the end, and there is this word that supports it. It says, and Party had kept her promise. For me, it's
Right.
the most powerful.
Yes.
But there is this faint image of Party. There is, of course, the image of Malli, and she's holding the iyachumbu, the vessel that Party cooked the rasam in. Now, take for a minute, if we take out those words and just have this image and let the audience, we know the end of the
Right.
story. She's found the recipe. She's gone, it's her rasam now. But somehow, that particular words and Party had kept her promise is a reaffirmation
Right.
to the child who is reading, to the parent who is reading it aloud to the child.
Absolutely.
And to the parent who teared up today saying that I just lost my mother 2 months back and she's no longer there. I wish I had asked.
Right.
So for her, she still needs to go to her mother's home and, go through some
Things.
saris and things, and she might just find the recipe.
Right.
So I find it a beautiful collaboration between words
And
and
images.
picture. Yeah.
Yeah.
But having said that, yes, I do love Sunaina's book
Ikru,
because
yeah.
it really says, and you know what I love about picture books, wordless books also, that you can say it from whichever
Absolutely.
perspective that you want,
Absolutely.
But here, at least in Party's Rasam context, we definitely needed those words to
Yes.
support that very, very strong imagery, because I think it just lent itself, it just took it a little higher.
Right.
level.
Lifted it.
Yeah, lifted it.
Yeah, right.
I agree with what she's saying. I just want to add 2 words. I think texture and depth.
Right.
And the best part is, I think both words can do that to images, and images can do that to words. It's a
So
very,
it's very collaborative.
very symbiotic.
It's a
very-
partnership of,
Yeah. So I think there are bits. No, it's fine. There are bits in the book where you can already understand what Malli is feeling by the kind of look that she has on her face. but kind of going down to the specific of exactly why she's feeling that way, the words help. And like in this particular spread where it says Party had kept her promise, for me the image of Party kind of hugging Mali is a very nice way of saying she's always going to be
Always
with
there
you.
with you, right.
So I just think it works both ways.
Both ways, okay.
Yeah.
So I think we have only 5 minutes more, and I'm wondering whether I can open this question to all of us, but out there to the audience who's listening, is there an ordinary story that you would want to have in a book that we haven't put it out there? And I want to ask the panelists also, is there an ordinary story in your life that you wish you had a book out there for? Does anybody have a question also? We can start here. Is that a starting point for a conversation? Are there ordinary stories that we need to tell today?
Sort of address that and also turn that back into a question.
Absolutely,
To the,
yes.
So, yeah, there are, in fact, ever since I've come here, I've just been feeling the surge of inspiration and creativity, and I just feel like there's so many stories that I now want to tell. And there are stories from my life, and I do feel like I can broadly categorize them in two ways. Like one, where I do feel that there is some inherent drama to the story, like some sort of a, I can think of a dramatic line that could form part of the story.
Right.
But there are some which are sort of very regular, but I feel that there is some kind of like a inherent contemplative nature to that sort of like a story. And yesterday, I think there was a conversation about, the narrative arc in a story and like having that high moment in a thing and all that. And I don't think the second category of things have that naturally. So two questions. One is like, can there be some stories like without necessarily that arc and the high point? And secondly, like if you don't automatically find like a arc or like a high point, like is there some way that you can construct that, or are they like, any tips to sort of follow so that a narrative arc can be formed within like simple slice of life situations?
Do you want to take that question? Anybody? I would also want to answer
No,
it. In a different
I
way.
wanted Vinitha to answer because her Ammu and the Sparrows is I think a fine example. We don't speak about separation. We don't speak about divorce. And how do you speak to a child about something that's happening in the household? So Vinitha, I think you're the best. You should answer.
I think we need, we've been talking about this. It's like everyday moments have the power and the potential to be stories. But you have to also think of the child, and to hold them through it, you do need that arc. So we have to find the arc. And Ammu and the Sparrow, there was no arc, and there was no publisher who took the story initially. It was just, I feel sometimes, and all of us feel as a community, sometimes there are so many stories that are just pretty beautiful stories that we just need to put them just for the beauty of that moment. And we just don't have the bandwidth to put all those stories every time. So we need that little thing, that little arc. So Ammu, for the longest ever, was sitting with me. And the ordinariness of my story was that I have a son who's called Ammu, and he's born on 20th March, and it's World Sparrow Day, and he wanted a story from me, and he wanted the story out there. There's a very poignant moment in my life where my mother, who's over 80 years old, who barely can walk, but would always carry him and drag him because she wanted to show him birds. And she would, so that moment, that frame was also there. So I put that together. And the arc I needed to get the story to be told today and to be used for children was the story of the fact that the wordlessness of grief when a child sees that there is war at home with two parents and he isn't or she isn't able to convey that. It is so tough for children. So I'm divorced now, and my children have gone through that grief. And, all the players in that moment are going through their own bubble of trauma. And sometimes the bubbles don't merge at all. So I sat there and watched my daughter, who would go to school and only look at the window. She would not sit in the classroom. And there was no way I could comfort her because I was also not. I didn't know what to say to her because she wasn't saying anything to me. So sometimes and I think we have to think of the reader. We have to think of so you need that. You do need that. I think you need an arc. You have to find that arc because there are arcs in every single solid moment that is beautiful too.
But while we are talking about these kind of stories, I think another genre of stories that needs to be addressed, which is again part of everyday stories, is pursuing one's dreams. It's not talked about at all. It always comes to a boiling point when an engineering student who is in his second year of engineering wants to become a stand-up comedian, because that's what that is his passion. So, and when people say, I want to jump careers, I want to do this. So these are also everyday courage stories. And there isn't that many stories like that doing, because that's happening right now.
Right. Yes, yes. Anybody, I think we're running out of time, so anyone has any question, then we can close it. Thank you so much.
There's nothing, I just want to add one more thing to this. I think, Satvik, what will be like, and this is something I've been struggling, because I have a bunch of ideas where I have the beginning of the story and I have the end, and I'm unable to connect it because I always feel like it cannot go like this and it has to go like this, right? If there's a way where we all, like, I don't know if we need to work together, I don't know how, but there should be ways to, like, we don't always need a story mountain, do we? It could be a story plateau sometimes.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think it's a fun exercise, or a story valley.
That will be something, a story valley.
I think that will be lovely. Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you have a
Hi.
question.
Yeah, one last question. Firstly, congratulations to all of you. You guys have published books. That's amazing. And you're talking to children, and children are usually very honest and upfront about what they think. So I would really like to know what was the best validation that you got, or what is the best feedback that you got, particularly from children as authors. What was that like when you realized that, okay, children are really liking the book, and the impact, especially when you are talking about, like, divorce, or you guys are talking about, like, grief. You are also, like, there are deeper meanings to the book other than saying it's just for entertainment, or, I'm reading it. So what was that impact and feedback like from your kid readers?
Right, yeah. I remember the feedback which my son had for the book, which was that, but what school is this? Because I didn't make it look enough like his school, and also the teacher was not like his teacher. So he's like, what school is this? Who is this teacher? So it really bothered him. That was the feedback.